Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode. Today, we're here with Caitlin. Caitlin is Chief of Staff at PsyMed Ventures, a venture capital firm that invests in frontier mental health startups, including psychedelics and neurotechnology. She is a first-generation Filipina-American Harvard graduate who started solo traveling at 19 years old. At a time, she felt lonely due to depression. Since then, she has traveled to all 50 states of America and 41 countries. She found deep relationships with friends from all over the world and went on an inner and external mental health journey. Solo travel has helped Caitlin find self-love and acceptance with every conversation in every new city, and now she is an advocate to help other women take the steps toward breaking their limiting belief and exploring the world. And Caitlin, thank you so much for being here with us. I have so many questions for you, but first, I want to welcome you and ask you a little bit about you and your background. So, you already sharing in the intro that you are Filipino-American, but were you born here? Were you born in the Philippines? How was, let's go back to where everything had started.
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. So I'm a proud Filipina-American. And what that means is I was actually born in Los Angeles, California, but was raised and spent part of my childhood in Angono Rizal, Philippines, which is a small town about 2 hours away from Manila. And that upbringing was really unique because I spent a lot of time with family in the Philippines, but also had that unique experience of moving back to America and spending more of my childhood there as well. So that dichotomy, as well as finding similarities in both America and the Philippines, really was an integral part of my life.
And what was it in your family? I know, well, your family, you guys could be considered immigrants, but in your family, you guys did some traveling back in the Philippines, or when you guys immigrated, you traveled around the US?
So we actually didn't travel that much around the Philippines. I was mostly just in my hometown. And then when I was in America, we didn't do that much travel, but we did do some travel across to Hawaii, for example, as well as to Mexico. So there was that aspect of travel that was embedded from my family, because we were from an international background, and it allowed me to have this curiosity that there was more out there than just my small town. And though, I came from a low income background, it was a unique part of my upbringing because I saw that there were other parts of the world outside of my small town.
That's great. That's great. And so let's fast forward a little bit. So you were in the Philippines and then you guys immigrated over here. Was it a big change coming from Philippines to starting a school here in the United States?
Yeah, it was definitely a big change. In the Philippines, a lot of people do speak English, but when I first moved to America, I was not in the same English level as my peers in my classes. I actually had to take ESL classes to improve my English so that I could do better in my classes as well. It was really nice because I grew up in an environment where there were other Filipino immigrants, and that made me feel more comfortable in my community. But there was definitely that change where I had all of my family in the Philippines, and then suddenly there were no family members, cousins, aunts, uncles around me. So it was definitely an adjustment period, but being a part of a really lively community in Eagle Rock in Northeast Los Angeles made me feel a little bit more comfortable as well.
That's one of the most important things when you move to a new country. Find a community that is similar to yours, at least for that first year, where you can feel more comfortable, especially as a child and where you don't speak the language either. So you told us that you're coming from a small town and you guys did some trips here and there. But where did that love for travel, where did it start?
I think that it really grew and started when I was in college. I went to Harvard University, and that was such a huge step from living in Eagle Rock, which was a small community within LA, because suddenly I was really immersed with people from all over the world. There were students that were international students, students that were from small towns, big cities. And I started to see that there were programs and opportunities to travel, and often travel without paying for the travel as well, through scholarships and fully funded programs. So it made me see that it was possible to actually go on these international trips. Before, it was just a dream to go to Europe, for example, or Latin America. But then because of college, it made it all come to reality.
Wow. Okay. Something that I'm impressed by your story is not only like how many countries you have visited, but also experiences you have had, but also being, coming from an immigrant family, learning English here, and also coming from a low income family. How did you make it into Harvard?
Sure. So there were a lot of aspects of my high school career that you'd expect. So I did have straight A's. I was a valedictorian. I was a two-time varsity athlete, and I was involved in so many extracurriculars, typically as a president in those clubs. But I think what really stood out to me was actually my personal story. And I wrote in my personal statement about a really deep topic of domestic violence, and particularly intimate partner violence, where I experienced both emotional and physical abuse from my boyfriend at only 16 and 17 years old. And, looking back at that part of my life, I felt like it was something I wanted to hold as a secret, but it was a unique aspect of me because I really used that experience to also have the motivation to volunteer at other domestic violence shelters, at homeless shelters, and to give back to my community. And I think that's what really helped me stand out in my application process to Harvard.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for speaking about that. There's sometimes so much shame about those experiences, but it's definitely something to create awareness about and just to every one of us to share our stories. And props to you that even though you went to those terrible experience, you did something about it and you were volunteering and you were helping other people as well to overcome it. And not only that, but you made it into a really recognized university and then you start traveling abroad. So thank you so much for sharing about that. So something that a conversation we had recently, you shared with me about how once you have had experiences of domestic violence, you feel that the world shrink, that the world is very small and that you don't have many options. So how were you able to overcome these limiting beliefs and then you start traveling and doing other things as well?
Yeah, sure. So I really describe it like you were a ball stuck to a chain. When you're in an abusive relationship, you feel like you can't escape because, like you said, your world feels so small. You feel like that's all that you deserve. You feel like you don't know how to escape it. You feel like you don't deserve any better. You don't know what to do. You're ruminating in your mind. And it's so difficult to get out of that situation. And I admit that for me, it took several months and almost a year to finally get out of this abusive relationship. It was really having physical injuries that was no longer able to be hidden that required me to finally leave. And this process of overcoming domestic violence and the PTSD from that was not just a miracle one moment. It was several years of finally admitting that I was not okay, being open to talk about it, and confronting some of the memories that were blocked as well through aspects like therapy and medication. But I think what really allowed me to come to that acceptance that I was not a victim, but that I was a survivor, was realizing that the pain has allowed me to create something beautiful out of my life as well, to share my story with more people, and that there were so many other people out there whose lives could be impacted if I also continued to talk about it. And so, having that position of more strength as a survivor took so many years, but finally opening up to that allowed me to feel more confident in myself in that aspect of my life.
Wow. Yes. I'm really glad that, even though you went through, you came to that realization. Also, from my part, I wasn't in an intimate relationship with someone that was violent towards me, but my mom was for a decade. And, I know that at least for me, travel was a way to escape, because I always knew that there was something better out there and that I needed to find it. And it took me traveling to several continents to be like, okay, I think I found it, and a lot of therapy as well. But when it comes, at least for my mom, I don't understand why she was in that situation for that long. And, hearing stories like yours kind of like stir up some memories and emotions. And I just wish that she was able to, back then, she was able to, know that there's something better out there. So yeah,
for sharing that story. It's really inspiring to see that travel has also made that same impact on you. And I think one of the reasons why speaking about domestic violence and the opportunities for travel can be really enlightening and expanding is because you often don't know what else is out there until people start speaking to you about it. So, for example, like if someone spoke to your mom about traveling to another place and to see what else is out there, maybe she could have left the relationship earlier, who knows? But all these conversations lead to greater confidence and the opportunity to leave these abusive relationships. So travel is a modality for you to have those deep and very impactful conversations.
for sure. So now I want to dive more into the traveling part and those conversations. So, when you start traveling, where did you start noticing after having this experience and then traveling? We always hear, yeah, travel, broaden your horizons and this and that, but I want to hear what it meant for you as a survivor.
Sure. So, I mean, when I first really started traveling, I wasn't integrating my experience as a survivor particularly. My first time I solo traveled was at just 19 years old. I went to Bangkok, Thailand, to do a Southeast Asia tour. And when I first landed in Bangkok, I was completely uncertain about what I'd experienced and what I would experience. And I was really excited, but also very scared. But it was really the first day where I met these two girls who were from London and Germany. And they said hello to me at a time when I was just unpacking, and they introduced themselves to me. They invited me to go out to a restaurant that evening. And it showed me that there were other solo travelers out there that were female, that were strong, that were empowered, and I could be exactly like them. I could turn around and say hello to that stranger that was walking down the street. I could go to a new city and feel like I'm learning from a new culture. It was that easy. And something as simple as hello could completely impact the way you think about yourself. And so I think before it wasn't specifically that I was integrating myself as a survivor into this story, but it opened up this idea that I wanted to put myself out into the world and really get out of my comfort zone.
And you did it. Now that you mentioned that, I remembered also at the beginning of my solo trips, it was all about becoming those women that travel and that are super interesting. And I just wanted to be as confident as they were. And I remember my first memory of meeting solo female travelers was back in my hometown in Venezuela. And were like these girls from Germany. And it was like, wow, this would be so cool to be like them and to have so much independence. And here we are, fast forward 20 something years. But definitely it's really great that you get exposed to these different cultures and different way of doing things. So, and also I bring that up because I know that from experience that the Hispanic culture and Filipino culture are similar in many ways, and I'm pretty sure that society expects from women is pretty similar as well. Also, Caitlin, I know you mentioned to me that you did a solo trip around the 50 states. And can you tell me more about that? Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So I honestly can't believe it still to this day that I traveled to all 50 states of the US. And it really stemmed from an experience I had in the first job I had out of college. I was working in a top tier finance company called BlackRock, and it was essentially my dream job coming out of college. I thought I knew what I wanted. I was living in New York City before the pandemic happened, and I thought that it was exactly where I needed to be. But during the pandemic, I experienced burnout, which is essentially when you feel overworked, where your mental health is really down and low, and you really can't work and function to the same degree. And that's really what stemmed and what influenced me to go on my 50 state road trip. I actually watched this documentary. I watched this documentary of an ultra marathoner that ran in every single state in all of America, all 50 states. And I saw that if he was able to run in all 50 states, then I could go on this journey across all of America as well. And so I made it a goal to hit all 50. I didn't know if it was possible, but it was one of my goals for that year once I left my job at BlackRock.
I want to ask you about that experience as well. It's because corporate burnout is something very, very common nowadays. And, anxiety, burnout, and just feeling depleted. So, what do you think that led you to that state of mind?
Sure. So I was an infrastructure investor. So that means I was investing in things like renewable energy, but also oil and gas pipelines, airports, and toll roads. And really, during the pandemic, when there was all this chaos, all of this grief and loss, when I was working, I just felt this disconnect. The work that I was doing was not nourishing my soul. And I could not get myself to have extreme care over the type of investments we were looking at. And on top of that, we were working a lot of hours. We were working around the clock because we were understaffed. I was typically working 12-hour days, typically all 7 days of the week. And I wasn't getting that time for rest. I wasn't sleeping that much. And I also didn't have that culture of openness to tell my colleagues that I was feeling this way. So I actually experienced quite a deep depression during my time at my first job. And it was really depression where I was silent about it. I was always cognizant of mental health, but I was afraid to tell other people that I was experiencing this at such a top tier company. And so burnout really happens when you just keep on going. You keep on going even if you don't have that energy to do so anymore. And I am a huge advocate for people taking mental health leaves. It's a medical leave. Your mental health is so important for you to be a great worker in a company. So taking that break, taking that vacation is so important so that you don't experience burnout.
What do you think was stopping you from sharing that you were struggling with your mental health?
Yeah, I've reflected on this a lot. And I honestly think it's my background as someone who was a first generation, low income individual. My parents, at the time, my dad lost his job, and I felt like I needed that income from the job. I wasn't really confident that I could find a new job during the pandemic. And it was this cycle of rumination that I was not good enough, that I could not leave this good company. I felt like I just needed to keep on going. In these moments of depression, you feel like you can't do any more than what you're already doing. So I think that's really where I had difficulty reaching out for help. Even though I was an advocate for mental health, it was so scary to ask for help.
It's always I understand 100%. And then when was that moment that you were like, okay, I need to experience something else. I need to get out of here. When did you get that aha moment?
Right. So it was really this crisis moment that I experienced something called an extreme manic episode. So mania is really when you experience high bouts of energy. So after several months of depression, suddenly I felt like I was on top of the world. I was literally running 15 miles a day, talking to hundreds of people. I didn't sleep for 4 days. And I felt like I could accomplish everything. I was so productive at work suddenly. But then with that high comes such a massive crash. And essentially, with that crash, I was hospitalized. It was my deepest depression that I've experienced. And in the hospital, I realized that I needed to leave. I needed to finally leave this environment that was not positive for my life. And I needed to reevaluate what mattered to me. And that's really when I started my solo road trip. It didn't start immediately. I took some time to get the right help that I needed, therapy and medication with my new diagnosis of my new mental illness. But it started that thought process of finding something more because I hit rock bottom.
Yeah, it's in those darkest moments where we realize like we have to do something different. So, and then how do you prepare for it? Because it's not that easy. I want to go on a road trip around all the 50 states, but it's not. I'm not gonna just get on my car and start driving. There's some preparation behind it, and not only like physically, financially, but also a mental preparation. How do you prepare for that?
Sure. So, I mean, in the very beginning, I was really focused on just calming my mind and feeling like I was ready to do anything. So, for a good part of that year, I was just, sitting with myself. And when I started to feel the motivation to plan my road trip, one thing I did was look at what was already available online. Other people have done similar journeys, they have routes available that they suggest. There are tips out there from people on YouTube and on Twitter, and as well just blogs out there that developed as well. So I did a couple days of research really and planned out the general route that I wanted to do. But I wanted to be really forgiving of myself. I was planning a 6-month road trip. If some of the days I wanted to leave the city earlier or stay in a city earlier, I tried to give that lead time. So my route was really fluid. I wanted to hit all 50, but if I wanted to go to multiple cities, I'd allow myself to do that as well.
How long did it take you?
It took me 6 months. So it actually was quite rapid. There's some people that take years to do it. Other people do it in just 2 months, but I wanted to take about half a year to complete it.
I will say it was pretty fast. Were you driving most of the time?
Oh, so I was driving a good part of the time, but every single city that I visited, I really tried to learn more about the people, speak to at least one person, whether that was, someone from a coffee shop, a person that I met at a bar, or someone that was just traveling as well. I really took that time to experience so much of it. And I think that though it was rapid, because I had a timeline, I was trying to make the most out of every single city in that time span.
And why do you have that goal, so to say, of talking to at least one person a day?
Sure. So I really went on this journey for my mental health to try to figure out reasons to be alive. And with every small conversation, whether it was just a few minutes to a couple hours, I knew that I was learning from that interaction. So I made it a goal to speak to at least one person because these people were living in such different worlds than me. Yes, it was in the same country, but if you're from a small town versus a mountainous region versus area with beaches, you have experienced a different life and you are existing, you're living, and you're breathing. I wanted to uncover why and how these people were able to go on with their days and have had such nourishing conversations because I made that effort to say at least hello to someone new.
That's great. You got out of your comfort zone for sure, not only by traveling, but making it a goal to speak to different people from many different backgrounds. Are there any conversations from that time that now that you look back stood out to you?
Yes. So there was one particularly impactful conversation. I was in New Mexico traveling to White Sands National Park. And it was during a time that I was actually feeling lower energy, feeling a lot of doubt in my travel across the US. And White Sands National Park is such a serene place. There weren't that many people that were traveling there. And so I was just doing yoga, I was meditating, I was relaxing, walking around. And then I happened to meet this woman that was also just by herself. So I decided to take a chance and say hello. And she asked me why I was why I was by myself in White Sands National Park. And I opened up to her. I was telling her about my mental health journey, how I was really reflecting that day about being a survivor. And what was so synchronistic was that this woman was also someone who had experienced domestic violence. She was much older than me. She had children, and she was still in the relationship. She was actually based in New Mexico, so it was a smaller trip for her. But she took this weekend to do a small trip to just try to think and try to realize and reflect on why she was in the situation that she was in. She was so afraid to leave her relationship because of expectations. And so we were just talking about our relationships, about love, about expectations and our hopes. And it was just so incredible to me that out of anyone in this entire park and in this entire state, I happened to meet someone who was also a survivor reflecting on similar things than me. So that was definitely one of the most impactful conversations.
Wow, that's definitely wow. Yeah, that's definitely a big synchronicity because out of all the people you could have met, you met her, and she was going at that time through a similar situation that you went through. One of the main reasons that I am such a big advocate for solo travel is just that opportunity to remove yourself from your everyday routine and your everyday experiences and just the people that you're around all the time. So you can kind of like zoom out on your life and make sure that, not make sure, but evaluate that you are in the right place and with the right people and just kind of like living the life that you want. And if you don't know it, now you have the opportunity to be with yourself and know what is that you want and what actions can align with it. So this woman, you did it all around the country. This woman that you met, it was just a local trip, but still, I'm pretty sure a very powerful experience for her as well. That's amazing. So as someone that experienced domestic violence at some point in her life, with depression, you feel that the world shrinks and there's like not many more things out there. So now that you have visited a lot of countries, you did this road trip, you had all these conversations and because you had that goal of speaking at least to one person a day. What is your take on it? What is your view on the war now?
So you hit it right, completely right. When you're a survivor and when you have depression, your world feels so small. There's this concept of rumination where you're just cycling through the same things over and over again. And after traveling to so many parts of this world, I realized that in the end of the day, everything really stems down to relationships, whether that's your close loved ones to a stranger that you meet. It's these relationships that make life so fulfilling and that can give you the inspiration to keep on going. Because everything you do, from work to your creative pursuits to travel, everything is enhanced when you start to meet people that give you that inspiration to keep on going.
That's for sure. We all need that relationship feel. That's how I call it. And how do you think this experience has helped you evaluated the relationships that you have right now? Maybe not evaluating, but I'll let's start this with an example. The other day I saw an Instagram story that said that, if you buy a water bottle at the supermarket, it's 50 cents. If you buy it at a restaurant, it's $3. If you buy it at the airplane, it's $4. So it's pretty much that we are worth what we're worth, but sometimes we're not in the right environment for us to show our potential. So for you, how has it been now that you have been in so many different environments and have met so many other people and developed many relationships? How has it been for you now choosing the environments you want to be in?
Sure. So I think that now that I've experienced so much travel, I really try to integrate that into my daily life, whether that's my work or my relationships as well. There's this concept of momentum when you're traveling. You're putting yourself out there, traveling to a new city, learning something new from a culture or a state or a community. And I really like this concept of adding momentum to my relationships, helping others grow as well, connecting them to other opportunities or to other people, trying new things within the city that you're living in with them, and your friendships can really blossom when you try new things together. But also not just new hobbies, but starting to really ask questions and have these deeper conversations with the people that are around you so that you can really put yourself outside of your routine and start thinking about what really matters to you day to day. So I think that worldly view that I've gotten from traveling so much, I try to integrate that now into my routine.
That was beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I don't have any more questions for you. I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to share with us.
Sure. So I really try to say this to as many people as possible, and I try to integrate this into my life as well. But everyone should really try to be present. When you travel often, you get really excited about learning something new and you want to learn more or experience more, go to that next city, try that new opportunity, but really sit with yourself and be present in the moment and take it all in. Just take that moment to see that you're experiencing something so beautiful and see how you're feeling, if you're happy or if you're uncertain, and really take that moment to breathe and really see that this world is so beautiful and so vast, and we're experiencing it all. And that's the beauty of humanity.
That's true. Being present. When you're traveling, you're overstimulated because it's a new environment, new food, new smells. But then on top of that, we're adding our phones and social media. So it's so important to take a break from all those stimulus and just be present and check with yourself and your emotions. So that's actually was a great advice and great thought. So, Caitlin, for anyone listening to this episode that wants to get in contact with you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Caitlin Nair. That's CAITLINNER. Or feel free to reach out at any time. So thank you so much for listening to my story.
And thank you so much for sharing it with us and for being so vulnerable. For example, I've had this podcast for more than 2 years and I've never shared what I shared today. So you can make a big impact just by sharing your story. And I will make sure to leave links to your social medias on the show notes. And yeah, what's next for you?
I have so many exciting things happening with PsyMed Ventures. We are constantly talking to mental health startups that are impacting the way we treat mental illnesses. So there are several conferences that I'm excited to go to. There's Convergence and there's Psychedelic Science in LA and Denver. I'm continuing to host events in Los Angeles that are mental health focused. I'm also hosting a women's dinner on International Women's Day. So really trying to be as involved, to talk more about mental health, to talk about new technologies that are out there, and just to meet other people who may be just getting started in their mental health journey or maybe deep into their research in the space, but just continuing those conversations and opening up the world to new opportunities in that way.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you so much for everything you're doing and for all the the spaces that you're created for women to share their stories as well. So thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you so much for having this podcast. I'm really happy that there's a space for women to get inspired by other people's stories. And I wish there was something like this when I was just getting started. So kudos to you.
Well, now there is. So thank you so much again.